The Week 16 preview episode of the Bears Talk Underground is brought to you by MyBookie. Guys, bowl season is here, and it's time to get in on the action with MyBookie. Don't be that guy with no rooting interest as your relatives or friends sit around watching the game. Not this year, when there are a record 41 bowl games to bet on, including the national championship game on January 7th. It really is the most wonderful time of the year. Make sure you're ready for the daily action by signing up at MyBookie today. They pay fast when you win, and ownership really cares about good customer service, and they offer the craziest props. Where you bet is just as important as who you are betting on, and if you want to make money during bowl season, you got to go to MyBookie. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check them out for yourself. Join now, and MyBookie will offer you a 50% deposit bonus to make sure you have a nice bankroll for bowl season. Use the promo code BEARS25 when you deposit to activate the offer. That's promo code BEARS25 at MyBookie. You play, you win, you get paid. This week on the Bears Talk Underground, even with a playoff berth clinched and a division crown in tow, the regular season isn't over yet, and there is still work left to be done. As our beloved head out west to face the feisty 49ers with the hopes that another victory will get them closer to a first-round bye. Can Nagy keep the Bears focused, or will they just phone it in? Oscar Aparicio, the Better Rivals podcast, joins us on the Week 16 preview episode of the Bears Talk Underground. You know, this is a feeling I can get used to. Week 16, and the season ain't over yet. Not even close for our beloved Chicago Bears, who are headed to the playoffs, defending the NFC North crown and looking to make some serious noise and to make some believers out of those national pundits who still don't want to give the Bears the credit that they deserve. What's going on, everybody? Larry D back for the Week 16 preview episode of the Bears Talk Underground. Oscar Aparicio from the Better Rivals podcast will be joining us a little bit later on to talk about what a crazy roller coaster year it has been for the 49ers. I mean, such high hopes. They're pretty much on the same plane with the Bears as far as the potential and what they were capable of this year. You know, the hot start that Jimmy Garoppolo got on, winning his first 5 starts for the 49ers last year. They had a good offseason. They're very happy with their draft, and it's just been one mess after another. Unfortunately, when I talked to Oscar, we didn't touch on the Reuben Foster thing to see, you know, what kind of distraction or what kind of mess that was for him. Unfortunately, we didn't kind of ran out of time before we could touch upon that. But obviously, we talked about Jimmy Garoppolo and the effect of losing him week number 3 in the season. They lost, they signed Jerick McKinnon away from the Vikings in the offseason. He got hurt in training camp on September 1st, ironically, the same day that the Bears acquired Khalil Mack, of all people. And, also very, very odd stat for their defense that we'll talk about during the interview. I don't want to give that one away just yet, but a crazy up and down year. Nick Mullins, their third-string quarterback, has been their starter for the last 6 weeks. Because C.J. Beathard, I don't remember what the injury was for him, but he went down just before the Oakland game. Nick Mullins makes his first start on Thursday Night Football against the Raiders of all teams, and they murder him 34-3. And he's kind of been the little engine that could. They've been 3-3 since he started, playing quarterback for him. They've won the last 2 games against Denver and Seattle. Denver was a playoff team when they played them 2 weeks ago, but after 2 straight losses, because Denver lost to 49ers and then again last Saturday to the Browns at home, and looks like they might be done as far as playoffs are concerned for the Broncos. But those 2 wins, they're 4-10 now. They're kind of doing what they did last year, where they're at the end of the year kind of giving some teams headed to the playoffs some late losses that they weren't expecting. They did the same thing last year to Tennessee and Jacksonville. They beat both of those teams in the month of December last year. Not to mention, even though the starters were sitting, they trounced the Rams week 17 last year, like 34-13 or something like that. So they basically beat 3 playoff teams in the last 5 games last year, had a lot to build on, a lot of potential. They locked up Garoppolo for the long term with a 5-year deal. And, you'll hear me talk about it with Oscar. Is like when I saw week 1, I watched the Minnesota-San Francisco game to kick off the year, and seeing how scrappy and how determined and how tough the 49ers played the Vikings, I really did think that the 49ers were going to be that team that was going to make a leap this year. And unfortunately, the rug got pulled out from underneath them when they lost Garoppolo 2 weeks later, week number 3 against the Kansas City Chiefs. So that was just bad luck, and the team has kind of been suffering for it ever since. So we'll talk more in depth with Oscar about that here in a little bit. But before we get to that, we didn't think it would ever be possible again with a Chicago Bear being elected to the Pro Bowl, just because guys that have been deserving the last couple of years never even kind of got a sniff, weren't even alternates in some cases and whatnot. And that is no longer a problem, guys, because the Pro Bowl rosters were announced on Tuesday, and 5 members of the team were elected to the Pro Bowl in Orlando between the conference title games and the Super Bowl. We had 4 starters and a backup. The 4 starters: Khalil Mack, no surprise there. Eddie Jackson, also no surprise. Kyle Fuller, no surprise there. Tariq Cohen as a return specialist, no surprise there. The lone backup out of the 5 making the Pro Bowl roster, Akeem Hicks, at the defensive line position. And I was the most excited about that one because Akeem should have made it both of his first 2 years in Chicago, and he finally gets the nod this year. He's not a starter yet, but he's going to the Pro Bowl, or he got the Pro Bowl nod. Hopefully none of these guys play in the Pro Bowl. Tariq Cohen made a comment earlier this week saying nobody wants to play in the Pro Bowl, and he meant that as saying nobody wants to play in the Pro Bowl because we all want to be getting ready for the Super Bowl. So not that the Pro Bowl is trash, which it is, or it's a joke, which it also is, but because he would rather be preparing for the Super Bowl a week later instead of playing in a nonsensical exhibition game. So, and what the other really cool thing was that 7 other guys were named as alternates, bumping the number up to 12 possible Pro Bowlers for the Chicago Bears in 2018. I mean, when it rains, it pours. Am I right? Those 7 guys being Cody Whitehair at the center position, Charles Leno Jr., Trey Burton, our tight end, Roquan Smith, and Danny Trevathan. I'm kind of surprised that neither one of those was a reserve for the actual Pro Bowl roster. And then 2 very surprising names, Leonard Floyd getting elected as an alternate for the Pro Bowl. And then the biggest surprise for me, and I was completely thrilled when I saw it, but it also does kind of speak about where the quarterback position is in the NFC anyway. Mitch Trubisky being named an alternate for the Pro Bowl. I mean, he's been such an up and down guy. Hearing that he got enough love from the fans, that's not too much of a trouble. But from what I understand, the Pro Bowl voting is 3-tiered. You have the fan vote, you have the player vote, and then you have, I guess, like the league vote, or what the owners and whatnot, for those to combine to get you where you're at, to your final score. If that's changed, somebody let me know. But from what I understand, that's how it's done, and it looks like Trubisky got enough love that he's a Pro Bowl alternate. Now, it didn't say whether they were first alternate, second alternate, third alternates, or anything like that. But those 7 guys, Trubisky, Whitehair, Leno, Burton, Roquan, Danny Trevathan, and Leonard Floyd, all named as alternates. And the way that people start dropping like flies when the Pro Bowl is in there, I'm guessing maybe a couple more of these guys can get promoted to the Pro Bowl roster before it's all said and done. But I think we're all in full agreement when we say that I hope none of these guys even gets anywhere near Orlando for the Pro Bowl, because we're preparing to beat the piss out of San Diego or Kansas City or New England or whatever in the Super Bowl. So that's the overall goal here. A couple other headlines before we get to our talk with Oscar. Wayne Larrivee. Some of you guys may know that name. I know it because he was the voice of the Chicago Bears from the time that I started watching the Bears when I was about 6 or 7 until, I think I was in college. 97, 98 was his last year in Chicago. He was the voice of the Bears all that time. Since the 99 season, Wayne Larrivee has been the voice of the Green Bay Packers. Freaking traitor. And Larrivee is it sounds like sour grapes when you sit back and listen to it. Called during the radio broadcast on Sunday when the Bears were playing the Packers, the fake punt attempt by the Bears. Wayne Larrivee called, I think the exact words were more arrogance from Matt Nagy going for it on fourth down. I guess he doesn't like Matt Nagy and his trick plays. He doesn't like that kind of thing. And I think it's karma, or something like that. Because how many times, and we've even seen it happen a few times during Bear games. How many times did the Packers get, cheap plays out of it happened like one time against the Bears. It pissed me off so much that they were doing cheap little things like, a guy's running off the field, let's snap the ball and get a free 5 yards. And things like that. When it bothered me so much because Green Bay was in those times was always good enough to beat us without those little ticky-tack things. Those things were not helping them win the football game. It was just helping them get 5 yards they wouldn't have otherwise. 5 yards they could have gotten on their own, but instead, we'll get them off the. We'll get a penalty because, so-and-so hasn't run off the field just yet. We'll snap the ball. We'll call a replay and get that cheap 5 yards that we could have otherwise earned ourselves. It's little things like that the Green Bay was always getting away with and things like that, and he wants to call it arrogance on the part of Matt Nagy when pretty much everybody else just sees it as, Matt Nagy trying to make a play or trying to hang on to the football. Now, I think we can all agree that maybe Matt got a little bit too big for his britches. Instead of just leaving the offense out there and going for it on 4th and 1, he tries to go with the fake, and it got stuffed. But and Larrivee doubled down on it because he talked to Chicago radio the next day and pretty much reiterated like he wasn't backing down for it. So good for him. First of all, for not backtracking or anything, but he thinks that the way that Matt Nagy calls the trick plays, like the touchdown pass to Bradley Soule last week, a.k.a. Santa Slay, or Akeem Hicks running for a touchdown against the Giants, and all other stuff like that, he thinks it's arrogance on the part of Nagy to do the trick plays instead of just playing straight up football. And this is especially hilarious to me that he's complaining about things like this because Wayne Larrivee was the voice of the Chicago Bears when the fridge, William Perry, was coming in on the goal line every time that the Bears got, and William Perry scoring touchdowns from 1 yard out when Larrivee was the voice of the Bears. I know that was 33 years ago, but he didn't have a problem with it then because the team that he was calling, the team that he was rooting for at the time, was winning football games. But I don't know what it is. Maybe he's got a beef with Chicago because Chicago turned on him when he went to Green Bay or something like that. But you always seem to feel a little bit more oomph in his calls. Like if you ever listen to Wayne Larrivee's like a highlight reel or something like that in a Bears-Packers game, go back and listen to the way Larrivee calls some of those touchdowns or anything that went to the way, especially try to find some clips of Jay Cutler throwing interceptions against the Packers, which unfortunately happened a lot during that particular era. Larrivee seemed to love it. Like for some reason, he really liked to watch Green Bay stick it to the Bears. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was an ugly separation, like when he went to Green Bay and Chicago Bear fans caught wind of it and stuff like that, and he's grown to have this distaste for Bear fans over the years, because that's 20 seasons now he's been calling Packer games and whatnot. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but he seems to really enjoy it when Green Bay beats up on Chicago, and he had a big problem with Nagy trying to go for it on 4th down. He also talked about the Wildcat play that went sideways, and Tariq and Jordan Howard fumbled the exchange, and Green Bay got it back, but it wasn't enough. He's got Khalil Mack out there getting booty sacks on on Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's how good we are and how bad Green Bay has been this year. So to me, it sounds more like sour grapes than anything else. But apparently, Wayne Larrivee thinks that Matt Nagy is arrogant for his play calling and what he's been doing this year. So, one last thing before we get to our talk with Oscar. The Chicago Bear fans, according to Fan Pulse on SB Nation, they basically rating the confidence of the fan base in their particular team. The Bears have the second most confident fan base in the NFL, behind only the New Orleans Saints right now. The Bears coming in at 97% confident, or at least the fan base is behind New Orleans, who's at 100% right now. My favorite thing about that was they gave numbers for the rest of the division. The Vikings, who are still in the playoffs as the season ended today, is only at 54%. Green Bay, 27%, and the Lions are at 23%. So we are way more confident in our squad than the rest of the NFC North is in theirs. So I just thought that I would throw that in as kind of the cherry on top, if you will, before we get to our talk with Oscar. So really, it's a great time to be a Bear fan, because there's nothing more exciting than Chicago when the friggin' Bears are winning, and we are doing that in spades this year. Hopefully another victory coming this Sunday against the 49ers. And to help us preview this ball game and talk about what could or could not happen with the 49ers and what's been going on with them in 2018, we'll bring on Oscar Aparicio from the Better Rivals podcast to help us preview week number 16. Week 16 of the 2018 schedule has the annual meeting, because it's 5 years in a row now between the San Francisco 49ers and our beloved Chicago Bears. We are heading out to San Francisco this time, where unfortunately the Bears do not have the greatest history, but taking on a 4-10 49er team that might actually be a hell of a lot more scary than their record would indicate. And here to help us out, back on the show from the Better Rivals podcast, Oscar Aparicio. Oscar, how we doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How are you doing?
Oh, well, I can't complain, and I literally mean that this year. It's not just something that you say, that I have been saying the last few years when at week 16.
Yeah, it's a good year for y'all.
Indeed. The last few years, when week 16 rolls around, I'm just waiting for the season to end so I have to stop watching crappy Bears football. But now I'm actually very excited about where we're at right now. So, yeah, it's been great. So what I wanted to talk to you about is this tumultuous season that you guys are in the middle of right now. When we talked back in June, is I believe when I had you on last, both of us very optimistic about where our teams were heading. Both teams seemed to have an off season where they would be going to be ascending this year, making a step, making a move to legitimacy, maybe next year being contenders, so on and so forth. And the two of us together, when we were talking, I listened to our interview earlier today, we're talking about how this is going to be a year where we're like, if we have a good year, maybe get 8 wins, 9 if we have a really good year. And if that's our baseline, then the Bears are at one extreme of that, and the 49ers unfortunately ended up on the other extreme. So it's almost like the Bears were best case scenario and the 49ers were worst case scenario, where basically it started falling apart just before preseason, or just before the season, with Jerick McKinnon going down with the ACL. Then week 3 you lose Garoppolo, and then it was all kind of downhill from there.
Yeah, and really I think I think you said it right. It's two extremes, and it's because a couple things went right for you to get to that extreme,
right,
and a couple things went wrong for the 49ers to get to their extreme. I think what went right for the Bears was, of course, Khalil Mack.
Yes.
And you got one of the two best players, I think, at the edge rushing position in all of football. And you did that on a team that already had a pretty good defense to begin with, mm-hmm, and a fantastic defensive coordinator.
Right.
And then you add that piece, and it unlocks just that entire defense. And I think for the Niners, of course, the exact opposite thing happened, which is the most important position in football they lost, and that was Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think edge rusher, quarterback, and cornerback are probably the triumvirate of positions, with quarterback being chief among them. Edge rusher and corner, you can debate which is more important, a corner or an edge rusher. I personally think a corner is more important, or a pass defender is more important, and the Bears have those in spades.
Yeah.
And so I think when you put all that together and then you add Khalil Mack, it completely unlocked that team, because I think if the Bears don't go far in the playoffs, it won't be because of their defense. It'll likely be because of their offense.
Agreed.
And for the 49ers, it's just, when you don't have a quarterback, it's tough to win. And CJ Beathard, I think, was a much bigger downgrade from Garoppolo. Mullins is probably between the two. He's played fairly well so far this year, but he's still no Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's exactly what the Niners find themselves in, is they find themselves in the same quarterback situation they were last year, probably a little better off. And this year, Garoppolo is not here to save them. They've just kind of got to ride it out with Mullins.
Right. And when I look at like the difference between, the Bears of 2017 and the Bears of 2018, there's three things that we're doing this year that we absolutely had an inability to do a year ago. Number one, we're healthy this year. I mean, I was looking at when the Bears played the Rams a couple of weeks ago. Combined between the two teams, there was one person on the injury report. That's bananas at week 14. You just don't see that. And so we're healthier than we've ever been. We led the league in IR the last 3 seasons under John Fox. Number two, we're number one in the league in turnover differential, plus 22. There's nobody better in the league than that. We have more interceptions this year than we had the last 3 years combined. And then number three is we don't constantly shoot ourselves in the foot. Penalties, our own turnovers, so on and so forth. Those three things went from, like we were talking extremes earlier, went from the worst extreme to the best of extremes under Nagy. And that's obviously we have an uptick in talent this year with the guys that we signed on the offensive side and Khalil Mack, being inserted into that defense. But, if we had the same problems the last 3 years, along with even with this roster, we'd probably be that 7-7 team or 6-8 or something like that, battling for a playoff spot instead of already having our division clinched. And when I was reading up on the 49ers, you guys have 2 interceptions all year long and five altogether. It was like, good God, you guys are on a 5 or 6 game streak of no turnovers whatsoever.
Yeah, it's real bad, man. The turnovers thing, I think, is a combination of a couple things. I think part of it is the defensive scheme. It's changed a little bit over the last half the year with Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh, of course, runs that single high cover 3 Seattle scheme. Mm-hmm. And there is some pattern match in there, and Vic Fangio runs a 2 high pattern match scheme. And pattern match is really, really awesome. It's definitely the kind of the way that modern defenses are played, where the defense kind of changes its structure into a man coverage based on the way that the routes are declared. And so the way that the concepts are built, the defense is going to react, and it's going to look like zone initially, but then switch to man. Basically, the pattern match is going to have a defender get close to a man so that they can be in a position to make a play on the ball. That makes a ton of sense, right? You can't make a play on the ball if you're not near them. And this is what Fangio does really, really well with his pattern match schemes. If you watch the Bears play defense, they're gonna drop a little bit, but then as soon as they see that concept declare itself, whether it be a smash or a sail or 4 verts or 3 verts or whatever, they all have assignments that are based on that route concept, and then they stick to that dude, and it feels like man-to-man coverage. Mm-hmm. And that's what puts those defenders in a really good position to make interceptions, to get the hand on the ball. And what Saleh does, on the other hand, is he traditionally spot drops a lot more than I would like. And the defenders kind of drop to an area and then try to read the quarterback and break on the ball. And Nick Saban has a very, very famous quote where, he kind of helped develop pattern matching with Belichick in Cleveland in the early 90s. And he says, that the breaking on the ball stuff doesn't work when you're going up against Dan Marino, who can basically zip the ball in against any coverage. And now quarterbacks are so good that is basically the NFL standard, is being able to beat spot dropping defenders. And so I think that Saleh's defense, it's changed over the course of the season, but he still relies a lot on spot dropping, and that doesn't always put his defenders in a great position to make plays on the ball. And that's when also we don't have great, kind of pass coverage defenders. I mean, Richard Sherman, who is not back to the level that he once was, he's still our best corner, but he's not like playing lights out football. On the other side, you've got Akella Witherspoon, who's injured, and he's had a very rocky season. And now we're going to play a rookie corner, Tarvarius Moore, who's a third-round pick, but he's converting from safety. So I think you put all that in a bag. This is, I think, the 9th different combination of starting safeties we've had all year.
Wow.
And this is where you end up where the Niners are in terms of turnovers.
So, I mean, is it and what is your turnover differential? I mean, do you guys turn the ball over a lot on offense?
Yeah, generally speaking, it's been better recently, but yeah, usually every Niner game has just about 1 or 2 turnovers on offense.
Wow.
And no turnovers on defense. So I don't know what the turnover differential is on the year, but I have a feeling it's somewhere near -18, -20.
Wow.
I'll look it up here in a second, but it hasn't been good. I think the last couple of games have been a little bit better, but even then, I mean, against Seattle. When we got blown out a couple weeks ago in Seattle, we lost the ball twice. One was a Bobby Wagner kind of strip of Jeff Wilson. The other was a pick six. Mullins has been better at protecting the ball recently, which is good. And that's why I think the Niners have been able to beat the Broncos as well as the Seattle Seahawks. But I think they lost the turnover battle in Denver too, and still won that game. So it's definitely not something the Niners are good at.
Yeah, maybe Kyle Shanahan should just tell the guys when they come out for week 1 that it's December already, because you guys seem to kick ass in December. You won 5 in a row to finish out the year. Last year, you're what, 2-1 in December so far this year. Maybe he should just come out and be like, hey, guys, it's December 1st, and we got 16 weeks of December, so let's just go out there and do what we do in December.
So to put a button on it, it's -22
Wow.
is the turnover ratio. It is by far worse than the NFL. Tampa Bay -16, Jacksonville -12.
Wow.
The whole December thing I think is interesting because at the beginning of this year, when we were talking about how the season was going to go, we called the whole December or late season kind of push just based on what the schedule was looking like. I mean, the Niners' opening tilt for the schedule was really tough. You've got Minnesota, which think of them what you will. They're still a good team, and their defense is coming on strong. You've got Detroit, which the Niners won. But then you had Kansas City, San Diego, Green Bay, Rams, with a couple of Cardinals games intermingled in there. We knew that the opening stretch of the year was going to be tough, and the rap on the Niners was going to be, they're like 3-5 over the first 8 games. What the hell happened? And then you look at the back half of the schedule, and you were facing the Raiders, the Giants, the Bucks, the Seahawks, who aren't as good as they once were, and then maybe the Rams with starters. And so you could see even before the end of the year that this was going to be another year where the Niners had a late push in the season, and that was going to be the narrative. And I don't think it has much to do with – it has a little bit to do with Nick Mullins because he's playing better at the quarterback position than C.J. Beathard. But a lot of it has to do with schedule and schedule luck. And you could have seen this coming from the beginning of the year in the preseason.
Yeah, let's talk about Nick Mullins. He's kind of like the little engine that could. Garoppolo goes down week 3, and it's on C.J. Beathard to come out and to lead the team because it's his team for the rest of the year now. I mean, Garoppolo's got an ACL. That's it. We'll see you again in 2019, Jimmy. And he goes down. When did he go down?
Week 3. It was the third quarter against the Chiefs.
No, not Garoppolo. Beathard. When did Beathard go down?
Oh, he went down right before the Oakland game.
Okay.
So that would have been right before week 8. Or right after week 8. Sorry, I think there's a bye in there somewhere.
So on short notice, because it was a Thursday night game against Oakland.
That's exactly right.
Nick Mullen comes out and throws for like 480 and 5 touchdowns against the Raiders, and now he's the talk of the Bay Area, and 34-3. I mean, he just smashed the Raiders on Thursday Night Football, and you guys are 3-3 since he took over as the starting quarterback, with the last 2 wins over Denver and over Seattle kind of sticking out there, because these are teams that Denver was on their way to the playoffs, and they lost to you guys and then got beat by Cleveland this past weekend, so they're probably done as far as the playoffs are concerned. But Seattle is most likely like 80% chance going to the playoffs right now, and you guys ended up beating them and avenging the loss from a couple of weeks ago.
So I'm going to give you a pop quiz here.
Okay.
Most passing yards through 6 career games since 1970. 5 players.
Uh-huh.
See if you can name a couple of them.
For like league-wide?
Yeah, league-wide. Most passing yards in their first 6 career games since 1970.
Well,
I'll give you the first one. Cam Newton.
Okay.
1,847 yards.
I'm going to go with Pat Mahomes because he was a beast the first 6 games this year.
That's exactly right. He's
Okay.
third, 1797.
Wow. Okay. Where was Cam?
Cam was 1847.
Okay. So what was he, like second or third on that list?
He was first.
First. Okay.
Since 1970.
Wow.
Mark Bulger, 1815. He's second.
Yeah, that makes
Andrew
sense.
Luck,
Andrew Luck, sure.
fifth, 1674. Nick frickin' Mullins, fourth on that list, 1,754 yards. He's played really, really well. I mean, he's had some easy defenses to go up against, right? Like he racked up yards against the Raiders. He racked up yards against Seattle. In Seattle, he threw for over 400 yards in Seattle. Who would have thought that, when the Seattle Niners rivalry got really heated in 2011, 2012, and you had Colin Kaepernick and Jim Harbaugh and even Alex Smith for a couple of games, who would have thought that the team to finally go into Seattle and actually perform really, really well would have been an undrafted free agent out of Southern Miss? He hasn't played, like he's not an elite quarterback by any stretch. I don't pull out that statistic to say that he is in the same category as Andrew Luck or Pat Mahomes or Cam Newton.
Sure.
But he has played within the structure of the offense really, really well. Kyle Shanahan schemes players open with a ridiculous degree of efficiency. And what Nick Mullins has been able to do that not other quarterbacks have been able to do, I mean, you look at the Brian Hoyer experience, chief among them, is hit those players when they are wide open. And the player that has more than likely been wide open is George Kittle.
Yeah.
And George Kittle then gets a bunch of yards after the catch, in part because that he is so open, but then also because he's such a good athlete. You look at his yards after the catch among tight end and wide receivers. George Kittle has 740 yards after the catch. The next closest receiver or tight end is Juju Smith-Schuster at 570. Mm-hmm. He's basically lapped him in terms of yards after the catch.
Yeah.
It seems like every other week he's got like a 75 or 85 yard reception.
Yeah.
And so that's really helped Nick Mullins. It's yes, he's playing well, and I'm not going to take that away from him because he is the second best quarterback on the roster easily. But it is a lot of Kyle Shanahan, and it is a lot of yards after the catch.
Well, let's talk about George Kittle because I was just looking at the stats right before we started talking. And Kittle's a Pro Bowler, bona fide, made the Pro Bowl this year. 72 catches so far this year. The next best receiver on the team has 24. So he's triple the amount of the second best receiver on the team. How has the rest of the league not figured this out yet?
That's the thing is they have figured it out, but the problem is that Shanahan's still going to scheme him open because you're going to put him in places to succeed. You put him on the move, and he attacks in so many different ways. There's a very common run play the Niners love to run, and this is the beauty of Kyle Shanahan's offense, is that it's an integrated offense. The plays are not singular plays. They play off of each other, and they look very similar. There is a zone play the Niners like to run where they run the tight end or the H-back, depending on where he lines up, in a sift motion where he comes across the formation and blocks the backside defensive end. It looks like a split zone, if you're familiar with that run. Well, they ran a screen last week, and they've run it before as well, where the tight end, Kittle, looks like he's going to block on that sift motion, runs across the line, but instead of blocking the defensive end, he actually runs around him and then just turns around, and the defensive end's like, cool, I got a free run at the quarterback. Oh, wait, it's a screen. And he throws it right past the defensive end who thinks he's got a free run at the quarterback, and now George Kittle's able to do George Kittle things. He ends up picking up 15, 17 yards because he's very, very good at getting yards after the catch because he is such an athletic player. And it's that kind of integrated play calling and that kind of stuff that makes Kyle Shanahan's offense so dangerous because here the defense thinks like, oh, I know exactly what this is. And it's not. And it's something completely different. And he gets the ball in the hands of his playmakers, and it's really, really awesome to see.
So let's talk about your injuries this year. You lost McKinnon even before the season got started. You lose Garoppolo week 3. Pierre Garçon, he's injured, correct?
Yes, he is. He's actually an injured reserve. So he's done for the year and maybe even for his 49ers career, how brief it was.
Wow. So, I mean, those are 3 of the bigger names on the offensive side that were expected to be contributors this year. Who else have you lost on the offensive side this year?
Honestly, those are probably the biggest ones. I mean, you've got Trent Taylor, who is our slot receiver, and he's been battling a back issue, and so he's not really been 100%. I think Weston Richburg, he's been on the injury report with an ankle injury for the entirety of the year, and it has affected his play. I'm curious to see how he bounces back, but he's not been as good of a free agent pickup as I would have liked. But a lot of that could be injury related. Who knows? I mean, those are the biggest ones. I mean, you lose your quarterback, you lose your star running back, your center is hobbled, and your star wide receiver, well, one of your kind of possession wide receivers, Marquise Goodwin, has been in and out of games, and he missed a couple of games due to a family matter. I mean, this is the team that was relatively healthy last year on offense, and if you believe in the power of statistics, you know that there's going to be a regression to the mean. Just like the Bears had led the league for the last couple of years in injuries, this year they're remarkably healthy.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than just regressing to the mean. If you look at a team over 10 years, they're going to have an average number of injuries, and this is just the year the Bears were healthy, and last year the Niners were healthy. This year they're not. So it does suck, and it is indeed next man up. But the only solace for Niner fans is that hopefully this turns into a higher draft position, and the Niners can turn that into more talent and more picks.
Sure. So you guys are 4-10. When I look among the schedule, I see a mixture of tight losses and also blowouts. You lose to the Rams 39-10, and then Arizona 18-15. You have a tight one against the Giants, and then Tampa Bay of all teams beat you guys 27-9. Then 43-16 to Seattle, and then you come back and you beat then your back-to-back wins with Denver and Seattle. Why is this team 4-10? I mean, is it simply the turnover differential? I mean, we can't get the ball back in the hands of the offense, and the offense is turning it over too much? Because it doesn't sound like you guys have. I mean, obviously Garoppolo is a huge loss to that team on offense, but I mean, is that the chief reason? Because you lost your quarterback? I mean, why is this team 4-10?
I think absolutely it's because the team lost the quarterback. If you look at a couple of those close games that the Niners lost, especially early on in the year, you think of the Green Bay game. If you flip that game and you flip one of the Arizona games and even the Chargers game, like the Niners were able to play the Chargers, who are one of the two best teams in the AFC right now. I think the Chargers and the Chiefs are right up there.
Yeah.
This is a team that could have beat the Chargers with a backup quarterback. So I think that a quarterback is worth that many wins because they are that important to your team. And if you flip just 3 of the games on this roster, you're looking at a 7-win team with 2 games left. And that's a team that's in the middle of the playoff hunt or in the middle of a wild card, I should say.
Right.
And if they would have just beat Seattle, then, that puts them in a prime position. And that's where we thought the team would be at the beginning of the year. If everything went well for them, we thought the team could really be around a 7, maybe 8-win team. And so I think that's the difference really is that quarterback. And you look at Kyle Shanahan, he's had a lot of close games in his 2 years with the 49ers. And of course, last year he set a record for most consecutive games lost by 1 score, right? Mm-hmm. And this year he's had a couple close games as well. I really do think that a lot of that is the quarterback. And I think you're right. A lot of that is turnovers. The Niners end up getting a turnover or winning the turnover battle in a couple of those games. It changes the complexion of the game entirely.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I do think it is a lot of the quarterback, and that's today's NFL, man. If you have a quarterback, you're raking it in, and if you don't have a quarterback, well, then you're looking for one.
Because I had a lot of hope for the team. The Bears played on Sunday night, Week 1, so the game that I got in my area was the Minnesota-San Francisco game to kick it off, and everybody's thinking about what we remember from these teams from last year, and to see the 49ers be so scrappy and Minnesota really had to earn that win Week 1. It was like, okay, well, Minnesota is who they were. They were at home. They were going to win this game, but San Francisco made them fight for it every single inch of the way. So that left me with the idea that San Francisco probably is going to be the team that everyone is kind of projecting for them to be. You come out a week later and you beat Detroit, and then the wheels fall off the next week against Kansas City. You run into the buzzsaw that is Patrick Mahomes, and Garoppolo goes down with the knee injury, and that led to six losses in a row after, including the game that Garoppolo went down. I mean, there's the season right there. You're 4-10. Those 6 losses, that's your season right there.
Yeah, it is, and it's in the middle of the season. It's really in the meat of it. So, I do think that the Garoppolo injury hurt a lot. I also think that the players that we thought would take the next step in year 2 really haven't. You look at Reuben Foster, who's no longer on the team.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a first-round draft pick that's now gone out the window.
Right.
You look at the Solomon Thomas, who has been underwhelming. I still think he can turn it around, but he certainly hasn't been great. And so I think that and Ahkello Witherspoon, who was the 3rd-round pick, he's had a very, very rocky season. He's been playing well these last couple of games, but now he's got a sprained PCL. and he's out for the rest of the year as well. So that's 3 players. Two of them are first-round picks. One of them is a third-round pick that just didn't turn out as well as you thought they would be in year 2 as they did in year 1. And so I think that has a lot to do with it as well. This team is talent deficient enough that 2 or 3 players that don't hit is, probably 30% of their good players.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, because I was listening to, I think it was the Athletic podcast, and it was, for Chicago. So I'm listening to the Bears, and they had the Bay Area Athletic guy on there, and he did mention that there was a lot of sophomore slumps from a Solomon Thomas, from the Witherspoon kid who was lights out last year, but hasn't really matched that this year, and what's going on with that. And then of course the turnover differential thing came in as well. 5 turnovers, and I think the Bears did that against one team. I mean, we got 4 out of the Rams 2 weeks ago. Exactly. So I mean, it was pretty crazy to hear that all season long that's only 5. And when I first heard that, I was like, well, that's why you're 4-10. 5 turnovers for the entire
that's a big
season.
Reason.
That's crazy. That's
a big reason.
Yeah,
and you look at the way a defense is built, and you think of how the pieces are acquired. I mean, I think the Bears are a perfect example. I actually used the Bears last week in the preview podcast to say, like, hey guys, have a little bit of patience, because you think of Kyle Fuller, who's good now, sure, but when Vic Fangio took over in 2014, Kyle Fuller was like bust city, man. Yeah, he was awful, and he's right now. The Bears have, I think, 9 players ranked in the top 25 in their position group based on Pro Football Focus grade. The only one who was there in 2014 was Kyle Fuller, and he was trash back then. I mean, he was absolute trash. Yeah. And then you add Eddie Goldman, you add Adrian Amos, you add Bryce Callahan, Akeem Hicks, Danny Trevathan, Eddie Jackson, Prince Amukamara. All these players were added, whether through the draft or in a value free agent signing, and then you're in the same system for years. And then you add that one piece that unlocks everything in Khalil Mack, and you get the Bears defense. And so I think the Niners are probably in that second year. They're the 2015 Bears defense. Mm-hmm. Kyle Fuller and Ahkello Witherspoon, I think, are having comparable careers. And now it's time for the Niners to add some of those players and have some of their young guys, stick out and actually perform. And so I think in 2 years or so, I think you're going to see that defense be formidable. But in the meantime, these are the growing pains.
Right, and when you mention Kyle Fuller, you're exactly right, because Witherspoon had a great year as a rookie last year. Kyle Fuller came out of the gates with gangbusters. I mean, in his rookie year in 2014. Famously, that first game against the 49ers in Levi Stadium, he picked off Kaepernick twice in the second half that helped the Bears win that game, and he had a pretty decent rookie season. He had a big sophomore slump, and then 2016 he misses the whole year with arthroscopic knee surgery. We don't see him play a down in 2016, to the point where Fangio's so frustrated with him, he is publicly questioning him in front of the press about whether or not he ever wants to play again.
Yeah, and you weren't even going to pick up his 5th-year option, right? Like, that was the big question.
We didn't pick up his 5th-year option because
that's right.
We did not, and because last year was his contract year, because he missed all of 2016 with arthroscopic knee surgery, something that keeps most guys out for 2, maybe 3 weeks. He was out the whole year with it, and Fangio, like I said, so frustrated, he questioned whether or not the guy wanted to play at all. In 2017, he was in danger of not even making the team, and then was forced into duty when Marcus Cooper went down. No, not Marcus. Yeah, Marcus Cooper went down with an injury, or actually it was Prince Amukamara who went down, and then Fuller came in. Marcus Cooper was trash, so we put Amukamara and Fuller out there, and that's been the tandem ever since. He played and earned a second contract, earned his money, and he's been lights out for us this year. So if Witherspoon is anything like Kyle Fuller, 2-3 years from now, you guys are going to be in love with the kid.
Yeah, exactly. So I think overall that's, it's a lot of things that go into the team not being good. I mean, whenever you've got a team that's 4-10, or whenever you have a team that, at one point had 2 wins for a long time, there are a lot of things that need to go wrong for them to get to there. And those are, I think, 2 of them.
So real quick about Khalil Mack, because that's actually been a point of emphasis, or something that the press has been talking about, because the 49ers were one of the teams in the sweepstakes for Khalil Mack when the Raiders put him on the market. And what made me, when I go back and think about it, I kind of laugh at the whole thing when we hear that, teams like Green Bay were in the mix, the Rams, who apparently just don't give an F about draft picks. They just throw them all out. If they've got draft, like they gave up 2 picks to get Dante Fowler, they gave up this many picks to get Marcus Peters and to keep Talib. They just don't care about draft picks. They got the guys they need. They're going to go ahead with those. But the Packers were in it, the Rams were in it, the 49ers were in it, and the reason that the Raiders say, or I don't know if they ever said it publicly, but one of the reasons rumored to be why they picked the Bears was because basically they thought they would get the best picks out of the Bears. Like, we're going to give them Khalil Mack, we're still going to get a top 10 pick, for the next 2 years. We're going to get better picks than we'll ever get trading them to the Rams or the 49ers or anything like that. They projected the Bears to give them the biggest turn on the investment, and it end up blowing up in their faces. They're going to get somewhere in the I hope they get the 32nd pick, because that would just be fantastic. But
that would be.
It's going to be somewhere in the 20s, somewhere in the 20s, because the Bears made the playoffs, so they're automatically, at the worst, they're going to be the 20th pick in the draft. And that's where it is. But that's why San Francisco didn't get the deal, because they thought they projected you to be better than us, so they went with the Bears because they thought they would get higher picks. And it's just like, number one, I still can't wrap my head around the idea of Gruden and McKenzie being like, yeah, let's trade Khalil Mack. That'll work out for us. And
yeah, that's a really weird. I mean, what John Gruden's doing in Oakland is weird. It is beyond reason for lots of people. But I do think that it was, that's why I think, you're like, oh, let's see where am I going to get the best, the best kind of draft pick. And it's like, nah, just take the best deal, man. If someone's offering you picks, just take whatever is going to be most on the table. And so I think part of it too has to do with the Raiders' inferiority complex with the 49ers. I think they were never really going to be comfortable with giving the Niners that premier player. So I think a lot of things went into it. It sucks that we don't have Khalil Mack, because he's amazing. He has more sacks with his back, I think, than our 3rd overall pick has with his front. Right. From last year. So it's the way of the world, man.
Yeah, I tweeted when I saw that happen. I was like, you're a bad dude when you can sack a quarterback with your lower back. You don't even need your hands. You just crash into him with your lower back, and he goes down.
I showed that to my wife, and she was like, was that an accident? And I was like, no, look at him. He flexes. Yeah. Like, he knows it. He turns around, and he's like, no, and he flexes on him. That's just, that's next level.
He just works with what he's got, man, because that guy had him basically around the throat. No holding call, by the way. But he's like, all right, to hell with it. I'll just hit him with my ass, and he'll go down. And he did. So there you go. So, Oscar, real quick, because I know you got to go, where do you see the game going on Sunday? Are the scrappy Niners going to show up and make it interesting for the Bears? Do you see too many deficits in the two rosters and an easy win for the Bears? What do you see? What are you forecasting for Sunday?
I do think that the Niners are going to make it interesting, and I do think this game is going to be oddly tight. It's going to look a little different than, of course, last year's game did, because last year, of course, it was another barn burner last year. I think it was like 15-14, right?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
15-14. It was the Robbie Gould revenge game,
right?
And I think that was it's going to look. I think it's going to be low scoring this year as well. Mm-hmm. I think the Niners are probably going to throw up somewhere near 17 points. Maybe even 13, depending on whether or not they give the ball up, a couple times. But I do think the Bears' offense is quite a bit better this year than it was last year. I think what Nagy's done with that offense, even if Trubisky's not playing worlds better than he was last year, I think Nagy's putting him in better situations, and I think Trubisky understands what his role is in that offense much better now than he did at the beginning of the year. So I think that it's probably a 7-point game, and the line is only 4. Which is an oddly tight line. And I said that about Denver, and then they went and they won that game. But I do think the Bears end up winning the game by a touchdown, and so I think it probably ends up like 17-24.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and I think that the line has to do with the fact that the Bears, even against teams that are quote unquote inferior to them, have either not played well or lost on the road. We're 10-4, but we're 7-1 at home, 3-3 on the road, and the last road loss was against the Giants of all teams. So, I mean, it's just we don't really show up that well on the road, or we haven't. And a team that has those 2 impressive wins against the Seattle and Denver could very well give the Bears more trouble than they need at this point in the season. So I think that's why the line is low. And I also agree that it's probably going to be somewhere in that 21-17, 24-17 area. As long as we keep you under 24, because that apparently is the Bears' magic number. If we allow 24 points or more, we lose the game. So if you score 17, great. That keeps you well under where apparently our magic number is, and we'll be good. So, but you know, I wish you the best, man. I was really hoping that you know, like when we ended our conversation in June, the two of us were talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great if both teams were in a position, they're playoff bound, we're fighting for seeds, and it got flexed to Sunday night? Wouldn't that just be something if that happened? Unfortunately, it didn't. We're sticking with the 3:00 Central Time kickoff, and you know, hopefully it will be an interesting game because, you know, of course I would be happy to see the Bears win by a blowout, but that would be kind of boring. So hopefully it is kind of scrappy, but in the end, you know, I just want to see a good football game, and especially at this time of year for my Bears, especially, everybody comes out healthy.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing. I hope everyone's healthy, and what we've talked about on the show is we hope for an elegant tank. We hope the Niners end up losing the game and end up, not intentionally by any stretch, but lose the game, cover the spread, make it interesting. That way they're still building blocks for the future, but at the same time, you got to move up that draft board, man, because right now it's about scouting them edge rushers. That's where we're at. Season's done, man. I'm watching some Bosa tape. I'm watching Josh Allen.
I was going to say, that's got to be the guy then, right? If you're edge rusher, you got to be salivating over Bosa right about now.
We'll see, man. I don't think the Niners will end up with the first overall pick, but I do think that they will be in a prime position to get someone like a Greedy Williams or a Josh Allen. And so it's draft season, man. We've been in draft season for a few weeks, so help us get there faster.
Right. I know all about that. I know that you know I know all about that. So I'm happy not to be thinking about the draft just yet, and that we're looking forward to the postseason. But again, I hope the 49ers bounce back, man, because I think the league is a lot more interesting when the 49ers are playing well. So hopefully that happens in 2019.
Have no arguments from me on that point.
All right. Oscar Aparicio, tell us where we can find you online, man.
You can always find me on Twitter at Better Rivals, and our show, the Better Rivals podcast, is on Niners Nation, so you can check it out there as well, or on any place that you find your podcasts.
Well, there you have it. Thanks so much for joining us, Oscar. We'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Thanks again, man.
Once again, want to thank Oscar Aparicio for joining us and helping us preview this game between the Bears and the 49ers. And I do think that this does have the potential to be another one of those scary road games against quote-unquote inferior talent, much like our last road game against the New York Giants. And we were supposed to coast to a victory. Remember when we talked to Sean, not Sean Murphy, Ryan Dunleavy from the Talk is Cheap podcast. He was like, I don't like any of the matchups. I'm really not thinking this is going to go too well for us, and gave us like a 3-touchdown differential, 31-7, 24-something, you know, so on and so forth. It feels like one of those games where the Bears on paper are the far better team. We're playing much better football, but there's just something about the way the Bears show up on the road this year that make you kind of worry about how this could go down, especially against a scrappy team like the 49ers, who have nothing to lose at this point. I mean, you heard Oscar talking about the elegant tank where, you know, they're not losing games on purpose, but they're not exactly upset about losing football games at this point because they're trying to lock in that better draft choice kind of thing. Kind of where we have been the last couple of seasons, where we want the Bears to win week in and week out, to hell with draft position or whatever. Losing the game is the silver lining. You know, losing the game and getting a better draft spot, that's the silver lining to the loss. You know, well, at least we're number 4. We're going to get a good pick, you know, kind of thing. You don't want the Bears to lose. Obviously, Oscar doesn't want to see the 49ers lose, but the silver lining to a loss would be, we're still, you know, number 2, number 3 overall, and, you know, we got a good shot at one of the more premier players in the 2019 draft. So, but it is worrisome, especially that guy George Kittle that we talked about very briefly. He's a tight end out of Iowa, was drafted in the 5th round last year, and you heard me talk about his stats. 72 catches, which is literally triple the next best guy, who's got 24, and 24 being Dante Pettis, their 2nd-round pick from this year. But, it's like it's very much reminiscent of 2012 for the Bears when Brandon Marshall had like 113 catches or something like that. And the next best wide receiver was, I think, Devin Hester with like 39 catches or something like that. I think that was the year Matt Forte had like 60 or 70 catches out of the backfield. But as far as actual wide receivers on the field in 2012, I think Devin Hester was second with like 36 catches and something like that. And Brandon Marshall was, over 110 for the season because Cutler was that's the only guy Cutler was looking for in 2012. And, very reminiscent of that. That's, the tight end is always the quarterback's best friend. He's helping up front and running, with the blocking. And, he's in the middle of the field where the quarterback can probably see him the best. And there he is right over the seam. Boom, and there he goes. And then, like you were hearing Oscar talking about with the way that Kyle Shanahan likes to run his offense, where he likes to, I think he called it integrated plays, where he'll run the same formation 2 plays in a row, but one will be they'll run out of that formation, 1 down, and then pass out of the exact same formation, the same motion, the same everything, but they'll pass this time. And that's kind of where they're able to get George Kittle open, and the kid has earned himself a Pro Bowl berth for his efforts this year, really looking like a guy that could be a resident at the Pro Bowl if all goes well for him and he continues on this trend that he's on now. So being able to stop him, to slow him down, I think will be big because he's been a big play guy for them. I mean, hell, that win over Denver, he had 200 yards receiving in the first half. He had like an 80-yard touchdown reception. He had other big plays in that first half. As a matter of fact, all he needed was like 5 yards receiving in the second half to break the all-time single-game receiving record for tight ends. And for whatever reason, it worked out that Kittle didn't catch another pass for another yard for the rest of the game. But it was more than the 49ers needed to keep the victory over the Broncos in that one. So he's got big play capability. When the Bears haven't played well on the road, it's been the big play that's hurt us. Think about Green Bay week 1, Miami week number 6. The big plays that got away from us weren't exactly on, those plays against the Giants, the touchdown pass from Odell Beckham on the fake, sweep or whatever. It's always those big plays we seem to fall susceptible to in the when we're on the road. So I guess discipline would probably be the biggest thing we want to look at for the Bears on defense this week. Discipline to stick to your assignments, to be able to make sure you're making the proper read, especially with the way Shanahan likes to run his offense with those integrated plays where he'll run a certain play and then come right back to it, maybe, either on the next down or very close to it, very shortly after that, he'll go back to it, only instead this time, like you heard Oscar describe, this play that they ran out of last time, all of a sudden that very same play with the very same motions and movements and things is a tight end screen that gets George Kittle out in open space for him to make a big play. So being disciplined, making sure that you're making the proper reads, and making sure that you're doing your job on each play, I think will be the big factor in slowing the 49ers down, to bottling up Kittle and helping the Bears progress to a win. And hopefully we aren't the team that helps the 49ers break their turnover-less streak. I think it's either 5 games or 6 games where they haven't caused a turnover against their opponent. The funny thing is they've won the last 2 games, so it hasn't really mattered for them. And then historically, the Bears have not played well in San Francisco. I mean, it's not Candlestick anymore, so the curse of Candlestick no longer exists. And our first game in Levi Stadium in 2014, we won that game. So who knows? Maybe the curse was broken when Candlestick was burned to the ground, or I don't even know if it's still standing or not. But they play in Levi Stadium now, so Candlestick isn't a problem. So we'll see how many of that holds up. Overall, on paper, this looks like, I don't want to say an easy victory, but it's a sure victory for the Bears, and it should be, quite frankly. The Bears are the far talented team. They're the far more dangerous team with our turnover differential and the plays that we're generating on defense, the pass rush that we have. We're going to get after the 49ers. Nagy says that nobody's sitting, no starters are sitting. We're gonna play our starters. We still have something to play for. The Bears are still trying to earn a first place bye, a first round bye, I should say. The only way to do that is to keep winning, and hopefully the Rams will trip up, because the Saints have to lose out in order for us to catch the Saints. I think we have a better chance of catching the Rams if they lose one more and we're tied. We're in the bye week and they're going to the wild card round. So the Bears do have something to play for, so I don't think we're going to be phoning it in on Sunday. It's just more important for us to actually kind of show up on Sunday, because it hasn't been something that we've done on the road. We've had some shaky road appearances this year. Think about the Arizona game. Think about Miami, obviously. You think about the Giants game. The Lions was a really tough football game, and obviously week one against the Packers, something always seems to kind of go sideways on us in those games, or we get off to a slow start. I mean, the Packers game aside, we got off to a slow start against Miami. We got off to a slow start against Arizona. We got off to a slow start against the Giants. You see the trend here. It's more important that we play like we're at home against the 49ers on Sunday, and have the offense come out and put one on the board right away, like we usually do when we're at home. Give the defense a lead to protect and kind of take it from there. So I really do think this is one of those games that should take care of itself, but it's on the road. It's a scrappy team that's just battling and looking to ruin some things for playoff-bound teams like the Bears and the Seahawks. They beat them last week. The Broncos the week before that. So I think that the 49ers are out to make trouble for the Bears, and if the Bears aren't careful, the 49ers will bring plenty of it. So, but otherwise, I think we're going to be just fine. I think we need to run the football, protect it, be like a game manager type thing on the offensive side, and then on defense, turn the dogs loose, see how many turnovers we can generate, and maybe we get this thing, out of reach by halftime. So hopefully that's how it will go down. So that is going to do it for the Week 16 preview of the Bears Talk Underground. I will be back on Monday. As a matter of fact, I might actually be back on Sunday night, because I am traveling tomorrow to go home for the holiday, but I'll be bringing everything with me so that I can record the show while I'm at my dad's house for the holiday. It will either be Sunday night after the game, or it will be early on Monday, because I have a family Christmas party on Christmas Eve to get to. So it won't be Monday night. It will either be Sunday night or Monday morning / early afternoon that the show will be out there. So that will be my Christmas present to you, is the Week 16 review episode. And hopefully it will be a victory Monday for a happy Merry Christmas to us all, instead of a bah humbug, how the hell did we lose to the 49ers kind of show. So be sure and tune in for that. I wish you guys all a Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa. I know that Hanukkah's already come and gone, so there you go with that. And just the happy holidays to you all. I'm thrilled that you're all here with me, that we're enjoying this season together. And it's probably been even more so than 2010 when I had the man crush on Julius Peppers. This has been the most fun I've ever had doing the show, and I'm thankful this year for all of you guys and for the Armchair Network and everything, just making the year that much more special. So thanks so much for listening to the show. We'll be back either on Sunday night or Monday, so keep your eyes on Twitter or Facebook for updates. And until then, my name is Larry D, and this has been the Bears Talk Underground.